Hi everyone, my name's Debbie. I'm the Festival Coordinator for the Council for British Archaeology. I'm going to be moderating tonight along with Sam, who's there, Sam Horns. We're going to turn our cameras off and mute ourselves, and we're going to manage the questions for Jim. If you have any questions, if you can put them in the Q&A, and if any do go in the chat, we'll take them separately as well. We are recording tonight, so you can watch it later. At the end of this webinar, we're going to put a poll up with 3 questions. We'd really appreciate it if you could answer those, because this helps towards our funding, and you will also receive an email with a further survey. It not only helps with our funding, but it helps us improve our output for next year as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Jim. Sam and I are going to go on radio silence and be in the background, so I hope you enjoy your evening.
Thanks, Debbie. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to tonight's session, which I've imaginatively entitled Creating Hidden Histories. And hopefully by the end of this evening, you'll have some ideas to help you go out and perhaps do some filming and creating your own little stories and capture the histories around where you live. So I'm going to crack in. So first of all, just to check that you're in the right place. Really, so the audience I have in mind when I thought of this session was for people with a passion for their local history, just like me. People who want to share their historical knowledge and that understanding, and people with little or no experience of making and or publishing a film of any sort. Also people with a smartphone and camera or computer, laptop, as that's essentially the equipment that you need to make these happen. Let's try and figure out how to move the slide. So what we will explore over the course of the next hour or so is different ways to research your local history using internet tools. I'm going to come off at once. How to write a script that is appropriate to your movie and your narrative. How to choose the equipment to use. How to film the footage, how to edit, add images and sounds, and how to upload and publish your films. And then finally, how to promote them, because that's what you would like, is other people to see the films that you've made. So first of all, a little bit about me, other than the fact that that's a really old picture. I am a former primary school teacher who I trained about 20 odd years ago. And I had a specialism in history. History's always been my passion. So that was where I started focusing. But then I moved into museums and heritage education, and then into events management in the heritage sector. As I said, I'm passionate about history, specifically my local history. But really importantly, is I'm not a trained filmmaker. Prior to me creating Hidden Histories last year, I'd not made a film. So I had some pointers and they really helped me. So I'm hoping that I can translate those pointers to you this evening. You don't have to be a filmmaker. If I can do this, trust me, so can you. So Hidden Histories of Leicester is kind of what sparked all this off. It was an idea I had during lockdown. I literally remember one evening trying to get to sleep. I'd recently finished my master's dissertation, so my brain was quite active, shall we say, because of that. And I wanted to keep my synapses firing during lockdown. And I came up with the idea of, well, perhaps I could use some of my random local history knowledge and put it to good use, and perhaps make some films or something like that. And that then led to a couple of conversations with some friends, which led to the YouTube channel, which hopefully this will work. No, cancel, that didn't work. I was hoping that would take you to a little snippet. And finally, so during the past year and a bit, I've created 5 episodes of Hidden Histories of Leicester. In that time, I've managed to gather over 1,000 subscribers, and the channel itself has had over 27,000 views. So I was quite taken aback with actually how much interest the channel has garnered. And so there's clearly an audience for this sort of content out there. So definitely worth going with it. And here he is. This is the little snippet I was hoping to show you. So what is Hidden Histories of Leicester? And who better to tell you than, well, me. Hi, welcome to Hidden Histories of Leicester, a series of videos exploring over 2,000 years of the not-so-visible history and heritage of the city, suburbs and wider county. My name is Jim Butler, and for as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the history of this, my hometown. And so I've gathered a range of historical and contemporary sources, as well as the latest archaeological reports, to build these virtual tours and give you an insight into our hidden heritage. My hope is that after each video, you will see some very familiar sites with a slightly different perspective. If you like and enjoy these videos, then please do remember to like the channel, leave any comments and subscribe. Thank you. So that was the introduction to my very first episode, just as I tried to articulate what I'd hoped Hidden Histories would become, and it's very much what they have become. And it was the best way for me to explain it if you haven't seen the films. Now, when I was thinking about Hidden Histories, like I said, I had a lot of random knowledge, and it was a case of, well, where do I start with this idea? What on earth would people want to perhaps find out about? What would be a reasonable amount of time to spend on a film? This sort of thing. So the first thing definitely was kind of choosing that topic. And so my recommendation to anybody following in these footsteps would be start off simple. Find something that's quite defined, either in terms of a geographical place or a specific event, rather than a broad theme or time period, because trust me, trying to get your head around how you tell the story of a theme or a time period is quite challenging, and actually you suddenly find yourself going down all sorts of rabbit warrens of where to go next. So definitely starting off, go for something that's really quite defined. And so for me, I settled on for the first episode, called Walking the Walls, was basically just going around the former Roman and medieval walls of Leicester. Now, they're 99% vanished now, but the signs are there if you know where to look. And so that became the idea, and it kind of springboard, and the learning objective came from the fact that I'm a member of a number of local history and heritage Facebook groups, and you get all sorts of conversations on there. And I noticed a conversation which was basically a discussion about there's a whole suite of streets in Leicester called with the suffix gate. So there's Gallowtree Gate, there's South Gates, there's Wood Gates, there's Braunston Gates, there's North Gates, etc. And there was a conversation about, well, which ones were actual gates and which ones weren't. And so I'm just going to close this curtain because the sun's right in my face. And so I wanted to be able to use this video to explain, okay, the ones that are named after geographical locations, i.e. South Gates, East Gates and North Gate, were the physical gates into the town through the walls. All the other gates are derivatives of the term gatter, which comes from when the town was under Norse occupation, or a Danish occupation. And so gatter was a Danish term for street or way to. And so hence Gallatry Gate was the way to the gallows, Braunston Gate was the way to Braunston, etc., rather than a physical gate. So that gave me my learning objective. So I wanted to outline, just retrace the route so that people could physically walk that route themselves and become familiar with it. And two, so that they would know the difference between, when they're on Braunston Gates, that means this, when they're at East Gates, that means this. And that really then helps you to structure what it is you're trying to say, and how best to then try and say it. And then finally, is the information already out there? Yes, I knew that information was already out. I picked it up from various books, museum displays, plaques around the town, etc. So that rather than try to reinvent the wheel, rather than choosing a subject which you've got to research in its entirety from scratch, definitely when starting off, it was a case of, okay, let's find something where the information is already out there, it's relatively easily obtainable. All I'm doing is pulling it together into a different medium to perhaps how people are already encountering it. So, they're my sort of key things for where you're going to start it yourself. Start it simple, have a clear learning objective, and use something where you've already got a lot of information already out there. So when it comes to researching, there were a number of sources of information you can use. So there's the record offices, libraries, museums, and online. Now, obviously, I did this during lockdown, and so my sources were somewhat limited, i.e. museums closed, libraries closed, record offices closed. So pretty much all I had was online resources and a handful of books on local history that I already happened to own. So that was going to be my desktop research method if we're going down that route. But certainly now that restrictions are starting to lift, I would look to utilise much more of those other sources for my ongoing films. So online research. There are quite a few government tools that are already out there that you can use quite effectively. So Heritage Gateway is the Heritage Environment Record for England, which I'll come on to a bit more detail shortly. There are the National Archives based at Kew, People's Collection Wales. Again, I will come on to a bit more detail shortly. I'm not even quite sure how to pronounce this one. It's another Welsh one. I'm not sure if it's Coughlin or Sea of Lein. But either way, check the web address out if you are Wales based, and that's another handy resource. Historic Environment Scotland, National Libraries of Scotland. They're really good tools. There's also a lot of academic and archaeological research published and available on the web. And now that can be full papers that people have written or research reports. Posters, which I find really useful. So if I can say, so University of Leicester Archaeological Services, for a number of the academic papers they've written, you will come across a poster, which basically is a condensed version with all of the key highlight points from a given excavation or project that they've been on, which they may have been presented at a conference or likewise. And they're really useful if you can see those. And I know ULAS put a lot of theirs online. So again, check your local archaeology provider, excavator, to see what they already have. And then publications. So again, ULAS have taken a number of their research projects and created quite handy, almost coffee table style publications with some great illustrations, which again you can utilize in your own personal research moving forward. However, of course, if you are going to do online research, well, let's face it, you are, because everyone does these days. It's the gateway, isn't it? You do need to check your sources and the citations. If you're going to use Wikipedia, or if you're going to use a specific source, check that they are credible. Check that their citations are from something credible. This isn't one man and his dog and their theory that King Arthur is buried under this mound here because, well, flowers grow there at a certain time of the year. But actually, what you're reading is reliable and trustworthy. Because ultimately, if you're like me, you would like to be seen as an authority, if that makes sense, on what you're talking about. That actually you've taken the time to research this to a certain extent, but that's based on much more detailed research of much more experienced academics who know what they're talking about. So you're a conduit for that, but you will be seen by the public as an authority on what you're saying. So don't let yourself have that reputation or that image tarnished because you haven't checked your citations, and actually what you're looking at isn't that reliable, and therefore what you're saying isn't necessarily that credible. So yeah, plenty of cross-referencing. If there's something that sounds a bit, oh, I'm not sure about that, let's see if you can find it elsewhere. If was Black Annis a witch in West Coast and Leicester? There's a couple of, she's a myth. And then you suddenly start to see the myth popping up in different places. You think, okay, perhaps there's some substance to this. So use those sort of quite simple and basic sort of just cross-referencing tools. Spending a few more minutes online cross-referencing could pay you dividends later down the line. So I wanted to do show you some of the Heritage Environment Record websites, so you get an idea of how you can physically trawl through a lot of the data that's already out there, which will then inform your research and ultimately inform your script and your narrative in your film. So Heritage Environment Records, for those that don't know, are a collection of all the data related to archaeological sites and finds, historic buildings and historic landscapes. Now there are, I think there's over 80 of them across the country. But what websites like Heritage Gateway do is they pool all those individual local authority or other sort of privately held databases. They pool all that information together into a central place so that you can then go through and they will do some cross-referencing for you on any given term, and hopefully you can then find what you're looking for much more easily than having to go around individually. So we're going to take a moment to have a look at those. Rather than trying to do this as a live click onto the website and show you, I've pre-recorded myself using these 3 key websites just to give you an idea. So we'll get started with those. So the first one is the People's Collection in Wales. In Wales has a number of various resources, maps and collection archives that you can flick through at your leisure. If you want to look at something more specific though, then let's say, let's have a look. Then we can get into a bit more detail about our find. So again, you can filter down the side here. There are trails, there are stories, there are collections relating to it. So I'm going to have a look. I want to know about Caerleon Castle. So I'm going to have a look at this. Click on the castle. And here's an aerial view of the castle. Now I can click on view map, hopefully. Excellent. And that shows me map of the site, and I can then actually, let's have a look at an early edition of where that now features on early historical maps. So again, excellent for wanting to take just a bit of a closer look. You can zoom in and out. Again, looking for continuity and change, looking at how streets, towns, roads have changed over the time. This is a really handy tool again to see. So look at this tide map. So again, another handy little tool. If we go back from there, then we can look at specific items. So let's look at this kindly on where. These Samian bowls, again, you can find out some information on those, and you've got the link to take you straight through to the Museum Wales collection, so that you can get the exact date and data relating to that site and those specific finds. Okay, so that's the first one. So that's the People's Collection in Wales, which is one resource that is really available and particularly relevant if you are based in Wales. The next one is the Historic Environment Scotland. Historic Environment Scotland. We simply go up to Archives and Research, down to Archives and Collections. Then this useful little tool here, PassMap. Now, there's a whole introduction section which shows you how to use PassMap, which is well worth spending a few minutes going through. But for today, we're going to go straight across and we're going to enter PassMap. So let's think of a famous Scottish historical event, and let's go for. So we simply enter into search, let's enter, and there we go. I'm going to go for Culloden here. So we'll zoom in on the map. Tells me the latitude and everything about that location, but not much else at this point. But if you go back, I can then select, let's have a look at the historic environment record. And okay, so we will drag this over. I'm holding one mouse down and dragging with the other one. So these yellow areas are historic environment record details within the map area that I've selected. So let's have a look at this little one here. Let's click on West Hill. And that brings me up near Leicester, post-medieval find, Culloden battlefield area. Let's find a bit more. Details opens a new window. And here we can find, let's have a look. So a summary, small quantity of metal objects were recovered during the metal detector survey in 2013. Full description, quantity of metal objects, 42 objects recovered, including 2 copper alloy buttons, 1 copper alloy buckle, a lead or pewter object. And if we wish, we can then click on this little image here, and that gives us a nice little shot relating to that particular item. So again, really helpful and easily accessible resource for anyone looking to do their own research. Okay, so that's, and again, there are, so I've chosen 3. There are a number of resources you can use. I particularly recommend the National Libraries of Scotland website, because it contains historical maps for the whole of Britain, and it is really good for, like I say, finding pretty much maps pretty much anywhere. And it has a functionality where you can screen a modern map over the historic maps. So again, there's lots. Have a really good explore. There's some really good resources that are out there. The last one I want us to look at though is Heritage Gateway England, which is the one I'm most familiar with. Heritage Gateway, which is the resource I'm most familiar with using for my Hidden Histories films. Now, there are 2 main ways you can use it. First is a quick search, which is handy if you know exactly what it is you're looking for. So I'm going to say Jury Wall, which is the Roman bath site in Leicester. And so it will come up. Historic England has 96 results because it's an Historic England site. And the rest, we're going through all the counties here. And there we go, Leicester City Council has 56 results. So, and then you can click on view all of Leicester's results, and it's all showing them 1 to 5 of 56. Now, these can be hit and miss in terms of the amount of data you get. So let's go for this Roman artifact in Bruges. Roman artifacts, including Roman coin from former Jewellery Wall Street prior to the. Now that's all it tells us. Not a great deal of information on that specific spine spot, but you can go back and you can work your way through all the 56 records until you find something more juicy. But what I prefer to use, however, is this more detailed search tool. And this version, you can be much more specific about what it is you're looking for. So we can click on here and we can do it by administrative location, which is basically the local authority that you want to look under. So I'm going to look under, there you go, Leicestershire. And that's as much as I want to put. In terms of what I want to find, I don't mind, I'm looking for everything. Now this is where it gets more interesting. So you can have all periods, or actually what I'm looking to do is look at a specific period, and look, you can literally go through all the way through these periods up until the 21st century. So for me, I'm going to stick Roman. Where's my Roman? It's gone. There we go. Click on Roman. I'm not fussed about who made a discovery or what type of resource. I just want to look for Roman things in Leicestershire, and I will press search. And then it starts looking, so we'll start to get these various results coming up now. Unsurprisingly, biggest hit is Leicestershire and Rutland, 2,302 finds. And again, we can look in all these. So, and now what you'll get here is some monument finds and some big finds and some individual bits and bobs. So looking at the Fossway, it's a major monument. So this is all the county areas in which it goes through. It gives you an idea now, because it's such a large monument. Obviously, there's lots more information and relating to the various excavations that have been on the site over the many, many years. And again, you keep going through, and these are the various sources. And this one even comes with images, so you can see various excavations underway, some aerial photography there as well. So really useful in that sense. And then actually, let's have a look at something not quite as exciting. So it's back to those results. And let's go. Those things we've got. Next page. Ooh, here we go. I need Roman ritual site north of Hallerton Manor. So, for those who don't know, the Hallerton Hoard was a find of over 1,000 Iron Age coins. It looks like a ritual site. So we've got a shrine, late Iron Age to early Roman, and here we have a summary and all the additional information you can want. Again, lots of detail. We've got a full list of allocated associated finds with the sites. There's some, I'm not sure if that's LiDAR or geophys there. That images as well that go with it. So again, you can get quite in depth, and I find this hugely helpful. I mean, it does mean sometimes trawling through a lot. I have probably been through almost all of the 2,302 records to do with Roman Leicestershire, but it's really, really helpful tool.
Okay, so I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour for what's out there and how you can actually access all this information yourself. Just point out, I'm not obsessed with Roman history. My next film is on Roman Leicester and Leicestershire, hence the reason I've gone through all those examples. But there is, you know, we've literally scratched the tip of the iceberg there. You can really pin those research tools down. And there are other ones as well that I've not had a chance to mention, but that offer different functionalities. But the data is there. And it is just sitting there, so use it and make the most of it. So when you've done your research and you've got your topic, you know, your learning objectives, and now you've researched it, so you feel you're pretty au fait with the subject, you feel quite comfortable. then it's time to start scripting your film. So it's about what it is you want to say, what is the story you want to tell, for want of a better term. Now, it can be something quite simple in terms of, you know, when I did the walls, it was simple. Okay, so if you go from point A to point B, C, D, E, and F, this is what you'll find. Or you might want to do something that's more chronological, you might want to do something that's more thematic. But have an idea of what it is you want to say, having done all that research. Which are the juicy bits? What's the interesting information that you think people are going to want to engage with? So like I say, is there a logical order in which that does all happen? So it might be chronological, it might be to attack it thematically, or it might be geographically, as I did with the walking the walls. And then start to think about, so what are the filming locations that best illustrate what you're saying? So in the image on the right there, you can see that this is from my episode 3, which was two ladies of Mercia, which basically explores the Saxon period in the county. But it's bookended by the lives of 2 women. So one is the Glenparva Lady, which was a burial, a high status burial found in Leicester in 1866. And at the other end, we've got Queen Ethelfled, as you know, in her role in fighting the Danes. And so there we have a narrative that enables us to string together the events that happen in between it across that 600-year period. And so as I was telling that story, I was trying to, and as I was writing it, it helps me to think, okay, I break it down into each different stop. So I'll start off with my introduction, and then I'll go to, so stop 2, I need to start with the story of the Glenparva Lady. So the logical place to be is at the site where her body was discovered, or as close to it as I can possibly get, to give that context, to give people, especially I'm trying to enable people who perhaps know these sites on a day-to-day basis, who walk down these streets on a daily level, a different idea of what they're looking at, actually suddenly realizing that actually what they do in that landscape isn't necessarily that dissimilar to what happened hundreds, thousands years ago. So filming locations, I find, really help to set the mood for what you're trying to say. So try and think of those as you're plotting out your narrative, and they will change as you're going along. As you go along, you'll think, oh, I need to tell this bit of the story though, and that slots in there. Or actually, if I add this, and suddenly that site isn't as appropriate anymore, there might be a better site to go to. So it will chop and change as you go through, but try and think your way through the filming of it as also you're doing the writing. And then think, like, say, how are you going to introduce your topic and conclude your film? You know, these things don't just sit in isolation on their own. You know, if you watch any documentary or anything like that, there's always an introduction to, you know, give people an idea. This is what's going to be coming. It's almost a bit of a teaser. And there's always a conclusion. People like to have an ending to their stories, even if it's a documentary, if it's not, even if it's fact rather than fiction, it's non-fiction. People like a conclusion. So start to think, okay, if I'm wanting to say in my introduction, I'm going to tell, well, this is what I'm hoping you'll find out. And at the end, I hope this is what you've discovered as well. So that you just, you know, you frame your film in a much more structured manner. So equipment. All my films on YouTube have been filmed with my trusty iPhone. I don't use a specialist camera. Smartphone cameras these days are good enough. And so in terms of equipment, I would say your most basic level that you need is a smartphone or perhaps a digital SLR camera, which, if you've already got them, is free-ish. Now, when I was first starting this, I had a good friend of mine, Jonathan, who makes films, And I sort of said, I've got an idea. How do I go about doing it? He says, well, there's a couple of things I would recommend you definitely buy. So level 2 is the microphone. So here we go, a little microphone here, it clips to your lapel and plugs, this one plugs directly into my phone. And that ensures that the vast majority of what you're saying is definitely going to be picked up. Most of the time your handheld will do it, especially if you're only doing it an arm's length away. If you're wanting to stand a bit further away from your phone, a microphone, and like I say, you can pick them up pretty much, relatively cheaply. Obviously, the more you pay, the better quality. I think I paid about 40 quid for mine. Tripod. So start pulling all this stuff out. My trusty tripod goes with me everywhere. Literally lives in the boot of my car now. Again, most of the fixings are standard, so you don't have to buy anything particularly fancy with it. The only thing I will say is check the height. The first one I bought seemed like a great deal. Ordered it, it arrived, and it only came up to there on me, which meant that my camera was constantly looking at my nose as opposed to actually filming my face. So make sure you get one which is tall enough for you. But I did, that was a great one. Again, I think I spent about 20, 30 quid on that. And then finally, the last thing that I sort of bought was a gimbal. Now, I'm just going to come out of screen share mode to show you this. So a gimbal is, I'm hoping you can all see this now in a bigger screen version, is a handheld device which basically keeps your phone at a level regardless of where you do this. So that keeps your movements nice and smooth. And this has been incredibly useful to me. Not only is it help with physically recording and keeping a nice steady motion, but this one also has some features on it like hyperlapse, which I've used in my videos where I'm walking long distances and it kind of time lapses it for you and compresses it all, so that what has taken me 5 minutes to walk actually takes about 20 seconds in the video. And it can do all sorts of things. I can make the camera turn around the phone or whatever. And it's a really useful tool. If I go back to screen sharing, share that. Okay, so again, so the gimbal was perhaps my biggest expense when I first started out, which was just over, it was about £100. And actually there are better versions of this one now already, massively. But those 3 items were the things that set going. But again, you can go further. So if you've got the time and the money, you can step it up to level 4. So level 4 is a teleprompter. So this was for my last film, episode 5, I stepped up to a teleprompter, which you can now randomly pick up. This one here, there's actually a mirrored case in here. You can see it has a glass there, and you place a phone or similar here, and it reflects your text back at you, and the camera sits behind it here, so that you can stare at camera for the whole time and read your script. And this cost about 120, I think. This was a cheap one. Again, they can go into the thousands. But for me, in terms of looking professional, that was really good. What I was doing a lot of the time before that was either having to hold my script, memorize a paragraph, put it out of view, speak to camera, go into the next paragraph, memorize it, speak to camera. Trust me, thousands and thousands of outtakes. Or alternatively, if I had help, I had my stepdaughter or my daughter with me, they would stand at the side of the camera holding my script, as close as they could. And every so often you'd see my eyes wandering up to the side as I desperately tried to read the script whilst I was still trying to look at the camera. So the teleprompter for me has been a big step forward, but as you're starting off, just take it easy, no need to spend lots of cash. And then level 5, oh no, it's level 4 still, which is my next step up really, which I haven't had a chance to use yet, which are these little things here, which is a wireless microphone. So with my wired microphone works fine, but I'm literally attached to the phone, so I can't get more than about a meter away from it. These will, one will clip onto here and get my voice, the other one is connected to the phone and it wirelessly transmits, which will enable me to create much more dynamic films instead of me just statically stood in front of the camera. So that's the equipment, but you can do it on a really cheap, almost free-ish if you've got the phone, all the way up to spending thousands. I think I've perhaps spent possibly close to 500, all in all. So that's equipment. So the next thing is actually thinking about, okay, so what am I going to shoot? What am I going to do? And that's based essentially on what do you want the viewers to see. So think about lighting. So if the sun's behind you, you will be silhouetted. The camera will not distinguish you, especially because if you're doing it on an automatic mode, the camera will struggle. The light levels are too disparate. So you will be silhouetted and it'll look rubbish. So ideally you want the sun facing you, but then you have the challenge then, the sun's facing you, you're being blinded, you're squinting. So trying to think where you can position the sun so that you can still comfortably read your script or teleprompter or just look at the camera while still being clearly in shot. Also think about the venue. So in this image here, you can see that what I wanted was the aisle of trees behind me, but what you probably can't see in this picture, at the bottom is you can see some of the Leicester skyline. And I wanted to point out that this was a point where the King's army had stood at the start of the siege of Leicester in the Civil War, and that they could see the town from this point. And so that's what I was trying to illustrate, was by positioning myself so that the city was physically just over my shoulder. So thinking about what it is you want people to see as well. Are you going to be in shot? There's no reason you have to be in shot. I have no problem, clearly, with being in front of a camera, and I like the idea of kind of making eye contact with my audience and telling the story. But if you're not comfortable in front of the camera, don't feel you've got to be. You know, there's lots of, you know, sweeping shots and or close-ups and zooming types of shots that you can do on the locations or the objects that you're talking about, and it doesn't mean you have to be. You can just do a voiceover over the top. So don't feel you've got to be, you know, David Attenborough or something. You don't have to be in shot if you don't want to be. Think about whether you're going to be filming alone. Now, this is at a practical level. So, as I said, I think for about 2/3 of each of my films, I do them alone. I do them remotely. I go out in my car and I'm off for a couple of days almost. But there are some times where I need help, definitely. And they tend to be usually when I'm in inner city areas. And for that, I use my my stepchildren and my children. And they can be really useful, children. They do have their uses. So they start and stop the recording. They count me in, 3, 2, 1, off they go. And they can, and they, like I say, sometimes they hold the script for me, or they used to, as I put here. They're also, sometimes, like I say, when I'm filming in town, if I'm in the middle of the city centre, I'm conscious I've got, you know, with my phone and with all this and like that, I've got a very tempting looking setup that wouldn't be too difficult for 1 or 2 people to leg it past me and just pick up and run. If you've got somebody else with you, then they kind of act as a informal security guard, because they're physically behind. People will think again about actually engaging with you in that sense.
And then there's B-roll footage. So yeah, so you want to capture perhaps you or the main object that you're talking about, but you'll need something called B-roll footage, which is something that will help transition the shots from one thing to the next, or that helps contextualize where you are stood. And so for that, and I'll use sort of the gimbal for this, where, you know, I do a sweeping shot up of the outside of a building, or a pan across a landscape, or a close-up on a specific object. I'll zoom in. And that then becomes your B-roll footage. So the thing that kind of helps you illustrate what you're talking about, gives you that context. Sometimes it can help patch over some of the cracks in your visual takes. You know, if there's a scene where suddenly you're surrounded by a swarm of flies, what you're saying may be fine, but you don't want them to see that, so you put an image, or you put a B-roll footage over the top of it, and all they can hear is your voice and look at this beautiful landscape. So B-roll footage is something also that you need to consider capturing whilst you're on location, just so that you can come up. You might not use it, you might use it, but it's always useful to have. Again, it helps with transitions, and it can be helpful with emphasis if you're looking at specific objects, and illustrate. So when you've captured it all, and I've usually captured it all on my phone, I then spend the best part of a day, maybe not that much, in what I call the editing suite. Now, the first thing I do is I go through my phone, I go through my my Photos app, and I literally choose all the takes that I want to keep. So I delete the ones which are rubbish or that have gone wrong, and the ones that I want to keep, I then send them to my files in the cloud, so that they're up there, they're safe, they're the ones that I want to keep. And then when I move on to my my MacBook or my computer or whatever, they're there waiting for me just to pull in to the editing software. So that's something, choosing the best takes. Now, I've got a MacBook, so I use iMovie, which is their built-in editing program. But on PC, there are loads out there, and they are free to download as well. I was going to go through and choose, well, this is the best one for you if you're on PC. But actually, lots of magazines and there are lots of articles out there which say, well, this one's a good one, or this one's not a good one. Most of them are pretty good, and they all follow this kind of drag and drop format that we're talking about here. So have a look around. If you've got a PC, you will be able to find something, and it will be pretty intuitive to use. Just read a couple of reviews and check it's the right sort of thing for you. Like I said, I use iMovie. So what I do, I've got all those files in the cloud. I then click on the import media here, and I select which files, and I just dump them all in to what is effectively a basket. And that can be my film footage, it can be any still images that I want to use, any illustrations that I've got on from websites and things, and it can be and sounds. And I dump them all into that import media thing. Then I start to create my timeline. I start to drag and drop them physically onto the timeline and build the story up. And then as I do that, I then start thinking about, okay, well, that clip finishes here, this one starts here. How am I going to transition from the two? Am I going to use a shot for my B-roll? There's usually some nice little options that we can choose from, where some built-in options for transitions where you fade in, fade out, and you just drop those into your timeline. Or you can add the B-roll footage. So on this illustration you've got here, what you can see where that white line is, the green line at the bottom is my music, my soundtrack. The middle line is me talking about Wistow Church by the looks of it, and the audio track underneath it is my voice, which I can separate if I want to. And then above it is the B-roll. So it looks like I've got an image there that I've taken that I'm placing on top of me. So when that plays, as you can see in the image in the top right of the screen, you can see the image that was there, which looks like a stained glass window, is just fading out. So we're at that transition point. So that was the prominent image, but now I'm transitioning back into becoming the prominent image. But all the time, my soundtrack was visible
was audible through all of that. So it just layers itself, and you can chop and change your takes up and down as best you want. And then again, so when it comes to adding photos and illustrations, so anything that I've found on the internet, I've either looked for something that's Creative Commons, and or I've gone to the source. So I use there are a number of illustrations that I use through my films of Leicester at different periods. A number of them were created by an artist called Mike Codd. They're really good. And they're owned by Leicester City Museums, or they're owned by the University of Leicester Archaeological Services. And so I've spoken to them directly, and I've said, look, these are the films I'm making. I'd really like to use those images because they illustrate perfectly what I'm saying. I'm trying to describe Leicester 2,000 years ago. You've got an image there which does it for me. Can I use it? And to all fairness, both ULAS and the City Council and pretty much everyone I've spoken to have said, yeah, that's fine, go for it, as long as you credit us on the image. So that's what I do. I take that image, I create a little text box with the credit on it, and then resave the image. And that's the one that I will then import into my media, so that when it comes on screen, it's there, and people can see who has the copyright. And again, yeah, with images, try and fade them in and out, like I've done with the stained glass window here, rather than just having a straight cut. It's just a smoother transition. It's less jarring for the viewer. And the same with sounds and volume. There are ways you can check your volume levels. People complained that my music that I have along the bottom that runs through the films was too loud. So my last one, I still got it running, but it's a lot quieter. And then again, opening, closing credits. You saw on my on the little thing that I showed you, I've got the Hidden Histories of Leicester, which appears across a pan shot of the landscape. That's a nice opening credit. And then for closing credits, I always have a little thank you to the people who have helped me on that particular episode, be that the kids helping to hold things, archaeologists that I know who have helped with some of the research or have fact checked some of the stuff for me. It's always nice just to acknowledge them and say, thanks a lot, guys. So almost there. It says, look at the time. So you've got your film, you've now you've got it on your timeline. So it's ready to go. So once you're ready, click save, and that will then start the process of converting it into an MP4 or whatever file format it chooses. So save that film, save that footage separately, because you might want to use it again, but not in that film. But use an external hard drive or something different, because these videos are quite chunky, they will eat up your memory on your hard drive of your laptop or your PC. And also something horrible happened to your laptop or your PC, they're gone. So I use, I've got a 2 terabyte external memory, which is perfect for this sort of thing. And I can then put that to one side. I also have some footage saved in the cloud. And again, you're just keeping everything safe, whilst not, really slowing down your laptop or your PC. When it comes to uploading into YouTube, create yourself a YouTube channel. I created Hidden Histories of Leicester, and it's kind of connected to my personal Gmail account as well. So it all verifies itself. And then when you upload it, it will ask you a series of questions about, do you want to make this private? Do you want to make it invite only, or do you want to put it out to the world? And again, that's up to you. It will ask you to give a title for your film and a brief description of what the content is. You say whether it's suitable for children or not. So again, that's a choice you need to make depending on what you've got. And you do all this, and then it will take a while to upload. So it usually takes about, for my films, which average in now at about 20 odd minutes per episode, it takes probably about an hour by the time it's finished converting everything. And then, so it loads it all first, then it converts it into the YouTube format. That probably takes the best part of an hour. But once it's there, it's great. You can then start to go to town. So I ping my films out once they're up and live. I ping them via Facebook because of all the local history and heritage groups that I'm a member of. I ping them out there. I started using Twitter. I realised soon in that actually I needed my own Twitter handle. It needed its own, Hidden Histories needed their own Twitter handle to talk from rather than just from me. So I created that. And again, it means that you can hashtag things lots more effectively to local groups and areas. And then what I do once it's out there, I also put it on LinkedIn. I put it on, it goes onto my Instagram and just pings out as far as possible. And then the YouTube has some great inbuilt analytics, which are able to tell you how many people have subscribed, what comments you're getting. You can respond to comments, how many views you're getting per, within the last 2 hours or last 24 hours or the last month. So you can, if you're really into your analytics, you can really dig down. You do it by age demographics, by country, assuming that the people who are watching it have given that sort of information. So that's my kind of whistle tour into how I've made Hidden Histories and hopefully how you can do something similar too. So I'm going to hand over to Debbie again in a second and see if you've got any questions. Well done for sticking with me for this long. I hope it's been of use to you. But please do keep in touch. So there's the YouTube address of Hidden Histories of Leicester, although the R is missing for some reason. And I can also be found hiddenhistoriesjim@gmail if you've got any questions for me, or you can follow the Twitter at Hidden Histories with a 3. Debbie, over to you.
Wow, there are no questions, Jim. Some people have said they have to leave. It's really, really interesting, and they've put some messages in the chat which we can pass on to you. Oh, hold on, I have a question now. Do you have any recommendations of social media analytics apps and tools?
Oh, for social media ones, I don't really use social media analytics. I use the YouTube ones in here. Sometimes I use Google Analytics. Sam, you're a bit of a social media bod. Do you have any recommendations? If he's still there.
We use Hashtagify for the CBA and get their reports. But that's the only time I've ever seen it used. Claire's used those before, so I'll hand you to Sam.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's the one. There's some great apps and tools out there. If you're looking for YouTube stuff, YouTube have some great. I think it's called Content Creator. I think it's an app, an added app you can get that shows you all the details of the analytics of all your videos in terms of who watches it in which countries and how much of the engagement those videos are getting with people.
It's now rebranded as a YT Studio for YouTube.
YT Studio, right? Okay.
That's a recent update they sent through.
Okay, brilliant.
That was all the questions, Jim. But you've put everything on your about your information, so I think people are probably going to go and process it now, and then you'll end up with a lot of other things. So somebody actually has just put through another one now. As I understand it, the YouTube setting is not about whether it is suitable for children, it is made for children. This causes a lot of misunderstanding. It is asking if it is specifically aimed at kids, e.g. a cartoon or a toy review, rather than if it is adult content, e.g. sex and violence.
So I always put on mind that it's not made for, children, like I say, it's about our children, the target audience for this content. And obviously my content isn't targeted for children, although they're more than welcome to watch it. There's nothing offensive on there. But that's an important distinction to make. Thank you.
Okay, there's nothing coming through at the moment. Nothing from anywhere else.
I was just going to say, there's a G in the chat who put a question a bit earlier. It kind of finishes. Maybe you could answer this, Jim. You might have already, but in terms of what is the best site for historical maps overlay for England, and in particular Merseyside?
for historical maps, I thought the National Libraries of Scotland I found is the most accessible and most user-friendly site that I've come across, which really surprised me, because I thought when I first came across it, I thought this would be very Scotland specific, but it's not. They somehow have got these records for pretty much every county in Britain, that, you know, and there's multiple maps you can look at, OS maps and all sorts from different times, which you can then overlap with each other, so you can really get a sense of continuity and change. So I'd say that one, National Library of Scotland.
Brilliant, thank you. And can I ask you a question or two, Jim, if that's all right? You've just been listening in. It's brilliant. So you said you got the next video is going to be on Roman Leicestershire. Is that right?
Yes. So what specifically I'm looking at with the Roman Leicester one is that a lot of people have, if like with any Roman town, you have this image of this completed sort of civitas, this, well, you know, the civic buildings are looking good, and sort of thunder rumbling overhead, if you can hear it, and it looks very, you know, grand, and everything, these images you have of Roman life. And actually Roman Leicester evolved over 400 years from an Iron Age settlement up to probably it peaked in about the late 2nd, early 3rd centuries before its decline. And so I want to talk about that journey, and not only just talk about the, you know, the physical changes, but also some of what we could tell about the people who lived there. You know, we've got people who are mixed race. There are burials that have been discovered of people who are mixed race from, you know, in Leicester, you know, with African and Mediterranean ancestry, and they're living in Leicester in the 2nd and 3rd century. We've got people who are rich, we've got people who are poor. And so I want to bring those people's stories into that broader context, and hopefully give a richer sense of what actually Leicester was like and the changes it went through those 400 years.
Brilliant, thank you. And another one, how do you choose what you'd like to take? What would you like to make a video about? Because you're getting through them. You're almost on, is it episode 6 that's coming out now? So there's not going to be, you're going to run out of a timeline before long. So how do you choose what you want to focus your videos on? What part of history you'd like to focus them on?
Sometimes they choose me. I think it's fair enough to say, and sometimes I choose them. So the first one was very much it chose me. You know, I was responding to something that I'd seen in the chat. I've left it this late. I've left it over a year and a half to go on to Roman Leicester, because for the people that live in Leicester, it's kind of, it seemed like the natural thing that people assumed I was going to talk about Roman Leicester. And actually I wanted to highlight Iron Age Leicester and actually point out that, you know, before the Romans even arrived, Leicester was a tribal capital for what is potentially the whole of the East Midlands. And so I wanted that story to come out next. And then little things just leave me away. What I didn't want it to be was just be a chronology of, here's a Leicester chronology, blah, 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 and it'd be predictable what comes next. Because I think that kind of takes the fun out of it, because people assume they already know that, so I'm not going to bother watching it. And sometimes it's just, I've come across little fun facts. You know, when I discovered about the siege of Leicester in 1645, which I never found out about at school, and it happened on the eve of the Battle of Naseby, and actually was pivotal as to what happened at Naseby. And it was the bloodiest 48 hours in the city's history. And so that had to be, I kind of had to tell that story. And what I thought was going to be one video actually turned into an episode of 3 parts, because I had one part having to contextualize the Civil War, one part which was just about that 48 hours, and then a third part which then explored the ramifications, both to the city, but also the wider Civil War afterwards. So it comes and goes, but trust me, there's, you know, well over 2,000 years of history. I'm not close to finishing just yet, Sam. Sorry.
No, we don't want you to. We don't want you to. We want 60 episodes plus.
Got a question here from Andrea. This is a great talk, thank you. How have you found being in front of the camera? Has there been much engagement offline, and has this been a positive experience?
How have I found being in the camera? The camera, I kind of got used to it. I think more because we're used to doing selfies and doing little things, that actually it wasn't as daunting as I thought it was going to be standing in front of the camera. You do get moments where you're out filming and you get complete randoms that, you know, either think they're being funny and whatever, and you're like, okay, fair enough. Or if you look on my first episode, there's a great shot where I'm at the clock tower in Leicester, and there's this bloke just wandering across the back of the screen, completely steals the scene, just gazing at the camera as if to figure out what on earth's going on. So they're quite fun, and you kind of roll with it, the good and the bad with that. And if you've got to retake again, you'll retake it again. And the more you do, the less self-conscious you become. It's been quite weird over the past couple of months as lockdown has released, and I've gone out to a couple of events or excavations, and people have started spotting me or recognizing my voice, saying, "Are you that guy that does those videos?" And the feedback has been lovely, absolutely lovely. So I can't, it makes you suddenly feel quite humble. So I started all this quite in my own little bubble, making these films, and so for people to start feeding back and saying, "Oh yeah, we really like that," or "We find that really helpful," is really nice feedback from the public. So far so good in terms of engagement offline.
I haven't got anything else coming through, Jim. Everybody's saying it's brilliant. So I'm going to launch the poll, if people wouldn't mind just completing that for us. Thank you. It's only 3 questions, 10 seconds of your life.
Should we end on a little fun question, Jim? So for all your research that you've done through the history of Leicester, if you were to have a time machine, would there be a certain point in Leicester's history or a certain person that you'd like to go back and meet?
There's a guy called Colonel Hacker, and he's a character that I'd never heard of before in my life, and he was part of the Civil War. He was part on the parliamentary side, and he found himself, he wasn't part of the Leicester garrison, but he found himself in Leicester on the eve of the siege of Leicester. And he was the guy that many people think he was the head of the guard at the execution of Charles I. And whilst during the siege of Leicester, when the people and the town surrendered, everyone was captured, all the soldiers were captured. And Colonel Hacker and some of his mates basically go up to a royalist guard and blag their way out. I don't know if they give a password or whatever, and they blag their out, leg it, swim across the river, and they're finally caught up again in Braunston, about 4 miles away. But I just the audacity of the man, I think, is just brilliant. I'd love to have been there at that point where he blagged his way out of this out of being in prison. So that would be my moment, I think.
Brilliant, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Jim. There's nothing else that's come through. Sam, I think, have you got any more questions?
No, I've done all mine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. I think I put a thing in the chat that there's loads more events that are still happening, so do join us, and really appreciate your attendance, and thank you very much, Jim. This is quite an abrupt when it's on webinar, so it just goes when I turn it off. So goodbye, everybody.
Okay, thanks everyone.